Welcome to the Appendix, where we read the primary sources of the past so that the present can be better understood. Today's primary source, Declaration and Resolves of the First Continental Congress, October 14, 1774. The passage of the Intolerable Acts brought widespread demands for a Congress of all the American colonies. On June 17, 1774, Samual Adams submitted to the Massachusetts House, then assembled at Salem, a resolution that a meeting of committees from the several colonies on this continent is highly expedient and necessary to consult upon the present state of the colonies, and to deliberate and to determine upon wise and proper measures to be by them recommended to all the colonies for the recovery and establishment of just rights and liberties, civil and religious, and the restoration of union and harmony between Great Britain and the colonies, and that such a meeting convene in Philadelphia September 1st. The resolution was adopted, and Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert T. Payne, James Bowdoin, and James Cushing were appointed delegates from Massachusetts. Most of the other colonies responded favorably to this proposal, and on September 5th, delegates from all the colonies except North Carolina and Georgia assembled at Philadelphia. When the North Carolina delegation arrived, a week later, there were some 55 delegates in the convention. The best and liveliest account of the convention is in the diary of John Adams. Whereas since the close of the last war, the British Parliament, claiming a power of right to bind the people of America by statute in all cases whatsoever, hath, in some accounts, expressly exposed taxes on them, and in others under various pretenses, but in fact for the purpose of raising of revenue, hath imposed rates and duties payable in these colonies, established a board of commissioners with unconstitutional powers, and extended the jurisdiction of courts of admiralty, not only for collecting the said duties, but for the trial of causes merely arising within the body of a county. And whereas, in consequence of other statutes, judges who before held only estates at will in their offices have been made dependent on the crown alone for their salaries, and standing armies kept in times of peace. And it has lately been resolved in Parliament that by force of a statute made in the 35th year of the reign of King Henry VIII, colonists may be transported to England and tried there upon accusations for treason and misprisons, or concealments of treasons committed in the colonies, and by a late statute such trials have been directed in cases therein mentioned. And whereas in the last session of Parliament 3 statutes were made, the Boston Port Act, the Massachusetts Government Act, the Administration of Justice Act, and another statute was then made, the Quebec Act, all of which statutes are impolitic, unjust, and cruel, as well as unconstitutional, and most dangerous and destructive of American rights. And whereas assemblies have been frequently dissolved, contrary to the rights of the people, when they attempt to deliberate on grievances, and their dutiful, humble, loyal, and reasonable petitions to the Crown for redress have been repeatedly treated with contempt by His Majesty's ministers of state. The good people of the several colonies of New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, Providence Plantations, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex on the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, justly alarmed at these arbitrary proceedings of Parliament and administration, have severely elected, constituted, and appointed deputies to meet and sit in General Congress in the city of Philadelphia in order to obtain such establishment as that their religion, laws, and liberties may not be subverted. Whereupon the deputies so appointed, being now assembled in a full and free representation of these colonies, taking into their most serious consideration the best means of obtaining the ends aforesaid, do in the first place, as Englishmen, their ancestors in like cases have usually done, for asserting and vindicating their rights and liberties, declare that the inhabitants of the English colonies in North America, by the immutable laws of nature, the principles of the English Constitution, and the several charters or compacts, have the following rights: resolved, that they are entitled to life, liberty, and property, and that they have never ceded to any sovereign power whatever a right to dispose of either without their consent. 2. That our ancestors, the first settled these colonies, were at the time of their immigration from the mother country entitled to all the rights, liberties, and immunities of free and natural-born subjects within the realm of England. 3. That by such immigration they by no means forfeited, surrendered, or lost any of those rights, but that they were, and their descendants now are entitled to the exercise and enjoyment of all such of them, as their local and other circumstances enabled them to exercise and enjoy. 4. That the foundation of English liberty and of all free government is a right in the people to participate in their legislative council, and as the English colonists are not represented, and from their local and other circumstances cannot properly be represented in the British Parliament, they are entitled to a free and exclusive power of legislation in their several provincial legislatures, where the right of representation can alone be preserved, in all cases of taxation and eternal polity, subject only to the negative of their sovereign, in such manner as has been heretofore used and accustomed. But from the necessity of the case, and in regard to the mutual interest of both countries, we cheerfully consent to the operation of such acts of the British Parliament as are bona fide, restrained to the regulation of our external commerce, for the purpose of securing the commercial advantages of the whole empire to the mother country, and the commercial benefits of its respective members, excluding every idea of taxation, internal or external, for raising a revenue on the subjects in America without their consent. 5. That the respective colonies are entitled to the common law of England, and more especially to the great and inestimable privilege of being tried by their peers of the vicinage according to the course of that law. 6. That they are entitled to the benefit of such of the English statutes as existed at the time of their colonization, in which they have, by experience, respectively found to be applicable to their several local and other circumstances. 7. That these, His Majesty's colonies, are likewise entitled to all the immunities and privileges granted and confirmed to them by royal charters, or secured by their several codes of provincial laws. 8. That they have a right peaceably to assemble, consider of their grievances, and petition the king, and that all prosecutions, prohibitory proclamations, and commitments for the same are illegal. 9. That the keeping of a standing army in these colonies in times of peace, without the consent of the legislature of that colony in which such army is kept, is against the law. It is indispensably necessary to good government, and rendered essential by the English Constitution, that the constituent branches of the legislature be independent of each other, that therefore the exercise of the legislative power in several colonies by a council appointed during pleasure by the Crown is unconstitutional, dangerous, and destructive to the freedom of American legislation. All and each of which the aforesaid deputies, in behalf of themselves and their constituents, do claim, demand, and insist on as their indubitable rights and liberties, which cannot be legally taken from them, altered, or abridged by any power whatever, without their own consent, by their representatives in their several provincial legislatures. In the course of our inquiry, we find many infringements and violations of the foregoing rights, which, from an ardent desire that harmony and mutual intercourse of affection and interest may be restored, we pass over for the present and proceed to state such acts and measures as have been adopted since the last war, which demonstrate a system formed to enslave America. Resolved, that the following acts of Parliament are infringements and violations of the rights of the colonists, and that the repeal of them is essentially necessary in order to restore harmony between Great Britain and the American colonies, viz., the several acts of 4 Geo. 3, Chapter 15, and Chapter 34, 5 Geo. 3, Chapter 25, 6 Geo. 3, Chapter 52, 7 Geo. 3, Chapter 41 and 46, 8 Geo. 3, Chapter 2, which impose duties for the purpose of raising a revenue in America, extended the powers of the Admiralty courts beyond their ancient limits, deprived the American subjects of trial by jury, authorized the judge's certificate to indemnify the prosecutor from damages that he might otherwise be liable to, requiring oppressive security from a claimant of ships and goods seized before he shall be allowed to defend his property, and are subversive of American rights. Also, the 12th Geo. 3, Chapter 24, entitled An Act for the Better Preserving His Majesty's Dockyards, Magazines, Ships, Ammunition, and Stores, which declares a new offense in America, and deprives the American subject of a constitutional trial by a jury of the vicage, by authorizing the trial of any person charged with the committing any offense described in the said act out of the realm, to be indicted and tried for the same in any shire or country within the realm. Also the 3 acts passed in the last session of Parliament for stopping the port and blocking up the harbor of Boston,
for altering the character and the government
of the Massachusetts Bay, and that which is entitled An Act for the Better Administration of Justice, etc. Also the act passed the same session for establishing the Roman Catholic religion in the province of Quebec, abolishing the equitable system of English laws and erecting a tyranny there, to the great danger from so great a dissimilarity of religion, law, and government of the neighboring British colonies. Also the act passed the same session for the better providing suitable quarters for officers and soldiers in His Majesty's service in North America. Also the keeping a standing army in several of these colonies in time of peace, without the consent of the legislature of that colony in which the army is kept, is against law. To these grievous acts and measures Americans cannot submit, but in hopes that their fellow subjects in Great Britain will, on a revision of them, restore us to that state in which both countries found happiness and prosperity. We have for the present only resolved to pursue the following peaceable measures. First, to enter into a non-importation, non-consumption, and non-exportation agreement or association. 2. To prepare an address to the people of Great Britain and a memorial to the inhabitants of British America. And 3. To prepare a loyal address to His Majesty, agreeable to resolutions already entered into. Thank you for joining us for our primary source today on the appendix. We will see you in the stacks.